The Rolls-Royce had been dead for 3 years. 16 mechanics had failed. $12,000 vanished into diagnostics that led nowhere. Then Marcus Webb walked into Thornhill Motors with duct tape on his boots and grease permanently stained into his knuckles. And the owner made a bet he'd regret in minutes. Section 1 Thornhill Motors occupied 3 acres of prime real estate in Connecticut's wealthiest suburb, old glass and polished marble that reflected the kind of money most people only imagined. Inside Bay 7, surrounded by diagnostic equipment that cost more than most houses, sat the problem that had become legendary in automotive circles. A 2019 Rolls-Royce Phantom, obsidian black, 200,000 miles. And completely, utterly, impossibly dead, Marcus Webb stood in the reception area, acutely aware that his thrift store jacket and discount work boots marked him as foreign matter in this temple of luxury. The receptionist had looked at him like he'd tracked mud across her Persian rug. Maybe he hadn't checked. "I'm here about the Rolls," he'd said simply. Now he waited while she made a call, her voice dropping to a whisper as if discussing his presence required discretion. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Marcus could see the service bays, each one spotless, each occupied by vehicles whose purchase price exceeded what his father had earned in a lifetime of factory work. The Phantom sat alone in Bay 7. Who'd raised like a coffin lid, Section 2 Richard Thornhill emerged from his office with the bearing of a man accustomed to deference. 6'2", silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Marcus's car. His handshake was firm, professional, and lasted precisely 2 seconds before he withdrew as if contact might be contagious. "You're here about the Phantom," Thornhill said. "Not a question." His eyes catalogued Marcus from head to toe, missing nothing, not the duct tape, not the grease stains, not the frayed cuffs on the jacket sleeves. "Let me guess. You saw the online posting and thought you'd try your luck where 16 certified Rolls-Royce technicians have failed?" "Something like that," Marcus said evenly. Thornhill's laugh was sharp, practiced. "Mr. Webb, is it? I appreciate your confidence, but this vehicle has been examined by the finest minds in luxury automotive repair. We've had engineers from Goodwood itself via video consultation. The diagnostic computer alone has logged over 400 hours connected to this car, and yet it still doesn't start." Something flickered in Thornhill's expression. Annoyance. Maybe, or the kind of frustration that comes from problems money can't solve. Thornhill gestured for Marcus to follow him to Bay 7, leading him past polished floors where the other mechanics watched the poorly dressed stranger with amused curiosity. Bay 7 held a Rolls-Royce Phantom that radiated silent authority even in failure, its flawless black paint and shining hood ornaments still commanding reverence. Thornhill explained the owner was Harrison Caldwell, a tech mogul whose car had mysteriously died 3 years earlier with no warning, no codes, and no answers despite $12,000 in failed repair attempts. Marcus slowly circled the vehicle, studying it with the focused eye of someone who understood machines beyond appearances. Marcus leaned into the engine bay and asked what happened when the key was turned, and Thornhill replied absolutely nothing occurred. No crank. No click, not even dashboard lights, despite multiple new components installed. Every diagnostic test showed perfect communication with all modules, as if the car's systems were alive but unable to awaken. Marcus asked what he'd get if he started it, and Thornhill smirked, offering a year of his salary if Marcus succeeded without replacing the whole system. The wager hung heavy in the air, sounding both ridiculous and deadly serious. The surrounding mechanics stopped working, their skepticism thick as heat, while Marcus calmly asked how much a year's salary meant. Thornhill answered $380,000, and Marcus nodded slowly, understanding the life-changing weight of that number before quietly asking for 30 minutes. Thornhill laughed at the idea but allowed it, confident that weeks of expert failure guaranteed Marcus would fail faster. Still, Marcus insisted that 30 minutes couldn't hurt anything. Thornhill checked his expensive watch and set the terms, supervision required and liability for any damage, assigning Jenkins to watch. Marcus ignored the posturing already entering his focused mental space where only the machine and the problem existed. He checked fundamentals others likely assumed were fine, battery terminals, ground straps, power cables, and fuses, while Jenkins dismissed the effort as pointless. Marcus kept tracing wiring by hand, trusting touch and intuition over assumptions. The Phantom's electrical system was incredibly complex, a network of modules and data buses more like a rolling computer than a car. Marcus knew complexity created blind spots because diagnostic tools only saw what they were programmed to see. He pulled out his old, cracked phone and searched his personal notes of strange past failures, typing symptoms while Jenkins mocked him for Googling. A memory stirred, a Mercedes with a bizarre electrical issue that felt strangely familiar. Marcus found the entry about total electrical failure caused not by a fuse, but by something mechanical in the power distribution box. He examined the Phantom's fuse box again, pressing the housing and noticing a tiny but unnatural movement. He asked when it had last been removed, and Jenkins shrugged. But Marcus discovered the mounting bolts spun freely by hand, completely loose. Someone had reinstalled it wrong. Marcus realized the bolts were never tightened, leaving the box slightly angled. But that alone shouldn't kill power unless something else depended on its position. Shining his phone light behind it, he spotted a ground strap barely touching its contact point. The loose position pulled the strap just far enough away to break the circuit under load while still sometimes testing okay, creating an invisible failure. Marcus quietly said he'd found it, though Jenkins laughed dismissively. Marcus asked for a 10mm socket and torque wrench, saying he still had 22 minutes left and intended to fix the car. Jenkins reluctantly brought the tools and Marcus tightened the first bolt, feeling the box settle correctly into place. The ground strap pressed firmly against the chassis again, restoring proper metal contact, and Marcus torqued both bolts to spec. Around him the shop grew quiet as mechanics gathered to watch. Marcus closed the hood and sat in the driver's seat, surrounded by handcrafted luxury, while the assembled staff watched from outside like spectators at a final play. 28 minutes had passed when he pressed the start button. At first there was silence, the same dead response that had defeated everyone else, but then the dashboard burst to life in a flood of illuminated systems. The Phantom had awakened. The starter engaged with a smooth mechanical whir, and the V12 turned once, twice, then roared to life on the third revolution, 12 cylinders firing in perfect sequence like contained thunder. Marcus let it idle, listening to the refined rumble, then gently revved it, feeling flawless response through the pedal as 3 years of silence ended because of 2 loose bolts and a displaced ground strap. He shut the engine off and stepped out into absolute silence, every mechanic frozen in disbelief while Jenkins stood pale and speechless. Thornhill approached slowly and asked what Marcus had done, and Marcus calmly explained he had tightened loose fuse box bolts that had pulled the ground strap away from the chassis. Thornhill repeated mounting bolts like it was a foreign concept, stunned that 16 technicians and factory engineers had missed something so simple. Marcus explained the loose box allowed false voltage readings that fooled diagnostics but couldn't carry current under load. Thornhill suddenly burst into genuine, almost hysterical laughter, overwhelmed by the absurdity, and checked his watch again at 28 minutes. Shaking his head, he admitted he needed to sit down as the weight of wasted time and money crashed in. Thornhill reminded Marcus about the salary bet, admitting it had been a joke he never expected to pay. Marcus said complex machines sometimes fail for simple reasons because people assume luxury means complexity. Thornhill called Harrison Caldwell and announced the Phantom was running, explaining it took 28 minutes and loose bolts, while shouting erupted on the other end. After hanging up, he said Caldwell was struggling to accept that an impossible problem was so ordinary. Thornhill asked how Marcus knew where to look, and Marcus admitted he kept notes from past strange failures, including a Mercedes with a loose ground. He confessed he had no elite certifications, just trade school and years of hands-on work. Instead of dismissing him, Thornhill explained the certified technicians had searched for problems worthy of their expertise, forgetting the basics. Complexity blinded them to simplicity. Thornhill said even a Rolls-Royce can fail like a Honda when a connection is loose, and that experience sometimes narrows vision instead of sharpening it. He then asked if Marcus truly expected the $380,000 payout. Marcus calmly replied that a bet was a bet, but he came to solve a problem, not chase money. The answer shifted the tone between them from transaction to respect. Thornhill asked why Marcus cared at all, and Marcus shared his father's belief that meaningless work is worse than hard work. He explained that 3 years of frustration caused by 2 unchecked bolts wasn't just failure, it was waste. After a long silence, Thornhill offered him a job running a new diagnostic center focused on impossible problems, needing someone who thought differently. Marcus shook his hand, stunned by the sudden turn his life had taken. Thornhill promised the salary as Marcus's pay for running the center, along with budget, authority, and autonomy, insisting he was a man of his word. He sent a formal contract immediately saying Marcus had a rare gift. Marcus read the offer in disbelief, asking why this was happening when they'd just met. Thornhill simply replied that Marcus had done in 30 minutes what others couldn't in 3 years. An hour later, Harrison Caldwell arrived, stunned to see the phantom alive, and said the car connected him to memories of his late father. He explained he drove it to his father's grave yearly until it died, making the loss feel fresh again. With emotion in his eyes, he thanked Marcus deeply, saying the repair restored more than a machine. Marcus offered quiet condolences, understanding the deeper weight of what he'd fixed. Richard reminded Caldwell the repair was covered, but Caldwell insisted on rewarding Marcus personally. Marcus declined direct payment, explaining he'd just accepted a job running a diagnostic center. Caldwell smiled and instead offered to fund whatever equipment Marcus needed, calling it an investment in keeping the impossible possible. He drove away in the Phantom, the engine's refined thunder echoing as something meaningful had been restored. The diagnostic center opened 6 months later in a renovated warehouse, taking on cases other shops had abandoned. Marcus solved impossible problems daily, hiring Jenkins and a brilliant young graduate who kept even better notes. Richard visited often, bringing problems and bad coffee, and their partnership grew from that strange afternoon when a simple fix changed everything. Marcus still checked basics first, remembering his father's lesson about meaningful work. The Phantom returned once just for service, Caldwell wanting Marcus to be the one to touch it, and Marcus treated it with sacred care. The duct tape on his boots was gone, but the grease on his knuckles remained, reminding him that the real reward wasn't T-money or prestige, it was making the impossible possible one loose bolt at a time.